So the Butterfly Foundation itself supports anybody who is impacted by eating disorders or disordered eating issues. So that is people that are reaching out for support for themselves. They might be reaching out for support for somebody that they love or that they're caring for. It also includes education and information for health professionals, for people involved in schools, working with young people, as well as being involved in a really kind of strong advocacy element of that as well. So trying to reach out and really educate and inform people, particularly about the importance of early intervention, as well as the importance of actually being able to have access to the help that's going to help them and be good for them at that point. We know that access to resources can be difficult for many people, and out of over 1 million Australians who experience eating disorders, we know that only about a quarter of those people actually do reach out for that support, and so we really want to highlight the importance of putting up your hand and getting the help that you deserve. So we have a number of different ways that we do that. One of those is the National Helpline. We're available again sort of all around Australia from 8 a.m. All the way up until midnight, Australian Eastern Standard Time. And if somebody's impacted by eating disorders in any way, they're looking for information, resources, support, some short-term counselling, or referrals to health professionals in their area, we have a database of people that we have spoken to and that we've run through a survey to really make sure that they do have experience in that area. So the helpline is one way that we do that. That also includes things like online support groups and online education programs for carers. We also have an education program as well. So we go into schools all the way through from primary right through to high school, educating not only students about the importance of positive body esteem and ways to navigate this new world of social media, but also educating teachers and parents as well as health professionals about the best way really to support somebody who might be experiencing disordered eating or body image issues or an eating disorder. Along with that, we've got some wonderful what would usually be face-to-face supports, but are online at the moment, and that's groups, some kind of more peer-led groups for people that are experiencing eating disorders as well. Eating disorders are often a relatively widely discussed mental health issue, but they are also a very, very severely misunderstood mental health issue. They aren't about vanity, they aren't a lifestyle choice, it isn't about a sort of diet gone too far. It is a very serious mental health issue that can have some really, really negative impacts on someone, on the individual experiencing that. It can have very negative physical impacts, it can have very negative emotional and mental health impacts as well. We do know that there are a number of different types of eating disorders. We often hear about anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa, so kind of restrictive and also purging types of eating disorders. But we also know of a number of other eating disorders as well that, again, aren't as commonly discussed, but are a lot more common in the community. So you'll hear about binge eating disorder, so that's characterized by binging episodes. We know of other specified feeding and eating disorders as well. That refers to an eating disorder that might be characterized by a number of different symptoms that may be present in other eating disorders, but not necessarily all of them. So that's quite a common diagnosis that is given. We also know of pica, so that's basically an eating disorder where people might eat things that aren't necessarily considered food or don't have that nutritional value. And we also know of ARFID, so avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. And that's essentially when someone sort of presents with a very narrow list of things that they would feel comfortable eating. I guess we also have another not necessarily diagnosed but very common and more commonly discussed type of disordered eating, and that's orthorexia. So that's often characterized by people leaning towards really what is considered sort of good food or clean food eating, and almost a fear of sort of eating anything outside of what they would consider good or clean. and that sort of falls within the disordered eating spectrum. And disordered eating is something that that sort of aligns with body image issues as well. So often it's the idea of, you know, either skipping meals, restrictive dieting, compulsive eating as well, and it sort of sits on an end of the spectrum where it might not necessarily be a diagnosable eating disorder at that point, but it's still very, very serious, and it's one of the most common risk factors for developing an eating disorder. There are a lot of different signs of people that may be developing either disordered eating or an eating disorder. Some of those may be very physical signs, so it may be fluctuations of weight, but a lot of the time what we notice first and what we notice more commonly is a change in behaviours around food and a change of attitudes around food, but also change in social behaviour as well. So whether that is pulling away from social groups, whether that's not engaging in activities that include eating, whether that is really kind of obsessive thoughts around food or weight, or body shape or body size. It might be over-exercising behaviours, but we also notice, you know, again alongside of that, maybe some depressive characteristics, high anxiety around food. So often it does present perhaps not as strongly as what we see, that are often sort of portrayed in the media. So we are looking for more subtle signs there. Understanding more a genetic component, perhaps of someone having a predisposition to developing an eating disorder, all the way through to kind of personal psychological factors. So that might include things like perfectionism, for example. So we do know some of those risk factors are. Doesn't necessarily mean that people that do present with those risk factors will always develop an eating disorder, and everyone with an eating disorder doesn't necessarily present with those characteristics. But it's a good way of sort of understanding the way that we can, you know, relate to the people around us that may be struggling.